be 6 o'clock now. Okay, thank you all for coming. 6 o'clock, the hour is here. Appreciate the good turnout. We're gonna have a select board's meeting. We have 3-4 items on the agenda for the select board meeting, then we're gonna go to a school presentation. Thank you, representatives, for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. February 12th, 2024. Select board meeting for the town of Reading. Are there any changes to the following agenda?
I have none.
I have one to add, no appeals and suit pending from the listers.
What's that?
No appeals and suit pending from the listers.
Okay.
It's a document that you guys need to sign, so.
All right. Bob, you have anything else?
No changes, no.
All right. We need to accept the minutes for the January 8th and the January 23rd select board meetings. You should have those in the packet. The 8th was the regular meeting and the 23rd was to sign the warning.
I'll move that we accept the minutes of both meetings, January 8th and January 23rd, as presented.
I will second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Treasurer's report.
For January, revenue, revenue was $59,796.56. Expenditures was $171,812.79. Balance as of the end of January was $492,783.98. Delinquent taxes owed to the town is $85,956.27.
I got no questions. All right, I'll move we approve them, get it on the docket.
Calista, the delinquent taxes, I think the last time we were talking, how long do we wait on these? How far behind are they?
We
What's
have
this?
four that are going to tax sale in April.
Four are going to tax
I
sale.
take that back. Only 3 will end up going to tax sale because they don't have mortgages on them. One has a mortgage.
Okay,
So it won't go to tax sale.
all right. So 3 properties will go to tax sale in April?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, you have to do the same process with the other one. At the last minute, the mortgage company will pay it.
we'll pay it.
Yeah, they'll
okay.
wait overnight to check the day of the tax sale. So they can pay all the extras too.
And those notices of those tax sales will go out when?
The property owners have been notified.
Yep,
It has to be put in the newspaper, which will go in the end of March.
end of March.
I don't have the exact dates
Yeah,
right now, but.
A certain number of days before the actual
Yes.
sale, something like that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Most everybody else is delinquent, has payment plans.
What do we think? Do we think these are actually gonna go to tax sale, or there's something is going to come in at the last minute? What's the guess?
I have no guess on.
No guess? Okay,
Well, I have a guess on one of them, but
yeah.
it'll go to tax sale and it'll be redeemed in a year. Uh-huh.
What does that mean, it will be redeemed in a
So
year?
it goes up.
After, when it goes to tax sale,
Yep,
the property owner has 1 year to redeem it. Whoever buys it at the tax sale cannot touch the place, they can't go in it, they can't do anything with it for 1 year.
okay,
After that year, if the owners do not come forward and redeem it, then they get a tax collector's deed, and they own the property.
okay, thank you.
Is there a second on the treasurer's
I
report?
will second this treasurer's report.
All those in favor? Aye. Action items, highways. Is Glenn on? Here he is.
He's gonna unmute himself.
You're muted, Glenn. Can't hear you.
There he is.
Technical difficulties, hang on a second. Is he unmuted?
Uh-oh. No, I lost the picture.
You're on the air now.
All right. Well, I don't have a picture anyway, so it's nothing. I'm muted again.
You're on.
Okay. Nothing new. You know, business has been all winter. Plowing sand one week and grade the next.
We're having another mud season, aren't we?
Yeah, I'd say so. But I don't know. I mean, everything's good to go right now, I guess. Got one truck that's over at Reed's being fixed right now, but other than that, it's business as usual, I guess.
You have 2 trucks in service right now?
Yes, we got the Western Star back this morning. That was they said she's pretty sure it was under warranty. It was a wiring harness that malfunctioned. But other than that, we're out there with the grader, much as we can anyway. But other than that, nothing really.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
FEMA and bridge repair update. Bob, you want to take over with FEMA to give us an update on what your operations are?
It's really simple at this point in time. Obviously, we've got all the roads, with the exception of Grasshopper Lane and Archer, open and fixed, and we're beginning to send stuff to FEMA. We've kind of got them buried right now because it's been 2 weeks and we haven't heard a word on any of the last applications we put back in. And I'm sure that Reading is not the only town that they're dealing with at this point in time, so we're in good shape. No money has come in, but we're in good shape as far as getting information to them.
I did hear from the state on when we may be receiving any money, and they are saying it is now 5 to 6 weeks.
So, April.
Before you see any money on the ones that you've already got approved.
We have one that's been obligated, I looked today. We have one that's been obligated so far.
Yeah, so we're looking at late March, early April for any money.
Okay.
And that's
We
our
meet
7
tomorrow morning, and I'm gonna put 2 more roads on the list and
Yeah, we have
see where we go from there.
5, we've submitted 5
Right.
already,
You've submitted 5
projects.
projects right now?
5 projects, yeah.
How many do you have after that?
The big one is Tyson Road. We've got Town Hill, Bailey's Mills, Stone Chimney. That,
Town Farm Bridge,
well, the bridge at Town Farm, yeah, we gotta finish up some work there before we can submit it.
Plus Grasshopper and Archer.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Bob, I think the last time you said that you expected there'd be roughly 20-ish projects, I think, when all was said and done with all the submittals. Does that sound about right?
We're combining some of the small ones, Bob.
Okay.
They allowed us to do that, so, for example, we combined Tattle Street and, South Bugger Brush. And we're gonna combine Davis, or not Davis, but Malagash, Matthews, and maybe Niagara Street. There's no sense in submitting them for just a few
Yeah,
bucks.
yep.
So, yeah, there's about 20 projects in total, but there'll probably be about 12 submitted.
Oh, okay.
total.
Okay.
Okay, bridge repair update. I've been kind of following the contractor on the bridges. The contractor started on Archer Bridge first. Presently, they hauled in stone fill. Sir Sosimo opened up the quarry right after Christmas so that they could get in and take material out of the quarry. shot rock that we needed for the riprap. That was, most of that was hauled in and placed. The Archer Bridge has been supported. The old abutment has been removed. We had a contractor come in and drive the piles a couple of weeks ago. Then on Thursday last week, the footing was poured. So on Archer Bridge, we have to pour the abutment. Then we could take the shoring system out. Then we're gonna excavate, pour 2 wings, and put the curtain wall on, backfill it, and that'll be ready to go. As far as Grasshopper, you probably noticed there's some activity going on up there. Put a diversion in on the side opposite Tyson Road. So they've got the brook diverted. They did that Thursday, Friday last week. Now they're excavating for the structure itself. The structure has been changed from what Jason Waysville, our engineering firm, had designed. He designed a open bottom, concrete footings 6 feet below stream bed, and then walls and a deck. And then the contractor was talking with us. We did that for limiting the disturbance to the stream. So the stream alteration engineer was okay with that design. Since then, they've been talking with the stream alteration engineer, and the design has changed to a concrete box. It's 18 feet by 8 feet inside. So it's a pretty good sized structure. There's Scott Jensen liked that concept better than the one that was designed, so we've changed. The prices didn't change, just the structure, type of structure changed. With that change, they was allowed to go ahead and build the structure, which was built in southern New Hampshire. CSI built the structure in a controlled environment. It's precast. There's 8 sections to the main box, plus there's 4 wings and 2 cutoff walls. Those are in the process of being hauled up. In fact, the cutoff walls were mobilized to the site today, and the excavation for the foundation, for the structure itself, is partially completed. The old culvert has been removed today, and with any luck, depending on what the weather is, we're supposed to be getting a little nasty weather. Not going to affect us here much, but southern New Hampshire and those areas are getting it. That's where the pieces are coming from. With any luck, the pieces are coming on Wednesday and Thursday. So it could be set and operational within 2 weeks. Then backfilled and open it up to traffic. It'll probably take 2 weeks to get all of the river work done. We have to put 2 feet of material inside of the structure, stream bed material, so that that's the rules that the environmentalists want us to follow. It'll end up with a 6 foot high by 18 foot wide opening, which is considerably larger than what we had, and it meets the new hydraulic study. So this structure should be there for 100 years. So you might be here to see the next one.
And I'll be blaming you if it doesn't work.
Okay, I'll take the blame. So that's good news. So we're in pretty good shape there. Contractor's sending in bills right away as he completes it. So we're making sure he has completed his portion of it. Once that portion, that amount of his schedule of values is completed, then we'll issue a check. So we've issued some payments on Archer, but we haven't issued any payments on Grasshopper. We just got the first bill today. So, and that's being paid with their line of credit?
It will be, yes.
Will be, that's what I thought.
Yes, it will be at
Yeah.
this point.
So, any questions on the bridges?
Just a quick update on
Yep.
FEMA. I just did a list. There's 16 different roads. Obviously, there's various projects on several of those roads. And 6 of them have been submitted, with 1 that'll be going in this week. So we're almost halfway there.
Good.
And it still doesn't count Archer and Grasshopper.
Yeah, good. Any questions on the structures, Bob?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we need to sign the warning for the informational meeting.
Yep,
That'll be coming out in our paperwork.
that can come in the paperwork. Yes, it's just the agenda for the informational meeting, which is the warning for the other. just like
That's
the other
March
one.
2nd?
March 2nd at 9
9
a.m.
a.m.
at the elementary school. Yep, so
Okay.
we just add that with the other paperwork for you to sign at the end.
EWP update, Bob.
Sure. There's been a lot of activity on the EWP program, and just to remind everybody that Emergency Watershed Protection Program is not related to what Bob Allen has been talking about from a FEMA perspective. This is preventative maintenance, if you will, on the rivers and streams, and there are 4 sites that have been approved by the state that are going to be receiving some debris cleanup or armoring, something like that, that will help keep the streams where they are at this point. And so we have submitted a grant request to do that work on these 4 different sites. That grant request has been approved, and we're in the process of finalizing the paperwork with the state right now. And we just heard within the last day or two that President Biden made a distinction, I guess, on the FEMA side, where the work we were planning was supposed to be a 75-25 cost share, where the state government will pay 75%, the town pays 25%. But we're also supposed to be following FEMA guidelines in this area, and it appears that for the events that just occurred recently, the FEMA is now picking up 100% of the cost of some of the items that are related to that flooding here. So now our state agencies are trying to get approval to change this cost share to 100% funded by the state. So we expect to hear more about that within the next week or two, again, from the state level. Next step in this is for us to go have an engineer plan out what has to be done in these individual sites as far as armoring, and then once we have a plan from an engineering perspective, that has to be approved at the state level. They come out and they do natural resource evaluations to make sure that any land that's disturbed in the process of protecting these areas, don't have any special protections in them in and of themselves. So that all that work is proceeding, I think, in a very reasonable timeline right now. The state's been great to deal with in this area. So more to come. Jerry?
Knowing that it's still somewhat TBD, will it affect the budget in any way, or are we still operating under the 75/25?
We're still operating under the plan that we will have to provide some level of cost share. And the nice thing about that is we can provide cost in kind. So we don't have to provide money. We could provide trucks. We could provide labor, manpower, resources, things like that, to make up our share of that. Okay?
How many sites do we have?
We have 4 sites, and they're all along the Millbrook area, kind of from the Agony Hill Road, kind of upstream, if you will, up along Millbrook, up until it comes to where Bailey's Brook, I think, joins in with Millbrook. There's a large collection of debris there. There's a large collection of debris just upstream of the Agony Hill culvert. And then there's been a lot of erosion along Millbrook behind several of those houses, just kind of around the old Hammondsville Tavern area. Okay?
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
And as you heard the change to the agenda, there's no appeals or suits pending from the listers.
Yep, they gave me this after the agenda was posted. It's something that we do every year. It's something that when they go through, they verify that there's no suits, no appeals or suits pending from what they've done. They've signed off on it. We need to sign off.
Okay. Up next, school board presentation.
Okay, we'll take it from here. Good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Ben Ford. I'll say right at the outset, I'm struggling with a little bit of a cold, so you need to bear with me tonight. My voice cuts out. But I am a member of the school board. I've been on the board about 5 years. I've got 2 kids, first and third grade at Woodstock Elementary School. I wear a few hats on the school board. Anna and I are both on the finance committee. I chair the finance committee. I am also the vice chair of the board, and for the past few years have served as the chair of our new build committee. And we'll talk tonight about the steps that have led us to where we are, and that is the bond that's on the town meeting ballot this year or the school ballot that most folks will see at town meeting for a new school building. And so we're here tonight to talk about that. I'll let the other folks up here introduce themselves. Sherry?
Sure. I'm Sherry Souza. I'm your school district superintendent, and I've been in the district for 30 years. And glad to be here tonight and to answer any questions I can about the program.
I'm Jim Fenn. I'm the Director of Finance for the school district, and I have not been here 30 years, but almost 3.
I'm Anna Sessa. I'm one of your 2 school board members, AKA school directors. I've been here in town since 2016, and I'm on Tyson Road. I've got 2 kiddos. I've got one at Prosper Valley in the 5th grade, and one just started at pre-K in Reading Elementary School 3 weeks ago, I think. So thanks again for everybody coming out tonight.
No, I'm Adam Amlin. It looks like I've been here for 30 years. I've been on the school board as a representative of Reading since 2018, with an 8-year-old daughter who's currently at Reading Elementary, and then an 11-year-old son who's at the Prosper Valley School.
Great, thanks everybody. We've been going around doing these for all the member towns of our school district, but we like to start these presentations with this item that came out in WCX last year. It's just a 2-minute clip, and hopefully the audio will cooperate with us. But one of the things that people often say to us is, well, it's really not the building that matters, it's what happens inside the building, and we couldn't agree more. And so we wanted to give people a sense of what's happening inside the building at the middle school and high school.
According to the nation's report card, 30% of high school seniors across the country are at below basic proficiency when it comes to literacy. But educators here at Woodstock Union are taking a new approach to turn those numbers around.
Reading never really clicked for me. I struggled with it for many years.
Cole Waters and Sam Gones will tell you reading has not come easily.
When I was younger, I thought I was stupid. I thought I shouldn't have even been in school.
But after spending time in class with Julie Brown, the structured literacy teacher at Woodstock Union Middle and High School, things turned around.
And I went through the course. It was mind-boggling because it's like everything changed. Everything started making sense. Everything clicked.
Being able to read means you can access your education.
Structured literacy is a program Brown helped start in the Windsor Central Supervisory Union in 2014. It targets middle and high school students who are not up to speed when it comes to reading proficiency by breaking down basic skills, 1 letter, 1 syllable, and 1 word at a time.
In an information age, if you can't read, you don't have the currency to navigate your future independently.
And due to the success of the program, marked by increased proficiency and feedback from students, Brown is now teaching the program to teachers across the district. Her work has earned her a nomination for the Life Changer of the Year Award, which is sponsored by the National Life Group that recognizes K-12 educators and school employees across the country for their impact on students.
What was critical for us is that we provide a program so they can be successful. And that's what we are celebrating with Julie. She's helped move us in that direction.
Vermont consistently ranks among the best states in the country when it comes to literacy, but officials say challenges still exist, especially among marginalized students and those with special needs. But by focusing on basic skills at a younger age, this district says it's making strides, thanks in part to a dedicated educator.
My sister is going to college because of her. I'm going to go to college because of her.
She has a connection with the students that makes them want to do their work. It makes them want to show up to class and go to school.
And Brown says while she's honored to receive the nomination, she says it's also a reflection of the support she receives from this community. Reporting from Woodstock, Adam Sullivan, Channel 3 News.
Sorry for the there we go. The technical difficulties there. For those that are on Zoom, we'll ping this in the a link to this here so that you can see this. But that's just a kind of a taste of the things that are going on inside the building. And You may have heard about some of the funding that the school district received during the pandemic. Those were called ESSER funds. And Sherry, if you could speak a little bit about how we are leveraging those funds to take advantage of Julie's work and some of the goals we've set around literacy, that would be great.
Right, so when this money was sent our way, we saw it as a great opportunity to address some of the district issues that we've had for a very long period of time. And so we invested almost a quarter of the federal money that came our way. We purchased materials, we did district-wide training, we hired Julie, the woman in the video, to work with all the pre-K to 4 teachers last year. And now she's working with teachers in grades 5 through 12 and looking at these very basic literacy practices to make sure that we can achieve a goal of 90% proficiency by 3rd grade, and that would continue throughout the student's experience. So when they graduate from high school, we have a 90% proficiency rate. We're excited. Julie and I have presented all over the country to share this model. It's very rare that you have this kind of dedication to secondary literacy. Many districts say, well, if you haven't learned it by 8th grade, then you're done. That's not this district. And so we've been working really hard, and we saw this as a real opportunity to use this influx of money to buy new materials for all of our elementary schools up through 6th grade, and that we make sure that everyone has that training. So we have high school teachers who are now working with Julie Brown around the literacy practices that happen in social studies and English classes. So we're excited, and we're already seeing progress in our pre-K classes and straight through. So it's exciting, and it was a great way to use that federal money.
Thank you,
Your
Sherry.
money.
Yeah. So let me give you an overview of what we're going to cover tonight. First, you're going to talk about the district itself, the state of our current building, the middle and high school building. We're going to talk about the steps that led us to kind of how we got where we are today with the project. Then go over the timeline, key milestones, next steps, and then we're going to talk finances. Vermont's education financing system is one of the most complex in the country. I'll do my best to try to break that down and simplify it for everybody so you can get a sense of kind of how taxes work. And then I'll show you a calculator that's just gone up online that everybody can download and enter your own home value, your town, your income level, and you can see exactly how much the bond would impact you if it passes in March. So without further ado, let's talk about the district. So our district is made up of 7 towns, and we've currently got about 1,000 students. Those students come from 7 member towns. That's Barnard, Bridgewater, Killington, Plymouth, Pomfret, Reading, and Woodstock. But what a lot of people don't realize is that we're actually more of a regional school in terms of the students who attend from other towns. And there are 13 school choice communities who currently send students to our schools. And school choice just means that that town doesn't have a school, so maybe it's a middle school or high school, they may have an elementary school, but they can then tuition students, this is on taxpayer expense, into other schools in the surrounding area. That's a Vermont tradition, and it's something that we've currently got 92 tuition students, and they bring in about $2 million a year for our district, and that's money that our taxpayers don't have to pay. It's a big part of our finances. 25% of students in our district identify as economically disadvantaged. This is a reduction from what it has been historically. The pandemic, as I think a lot of people saw, brought a lot of people from other places. People bought homes here, settled in, and there's a degree of affluence across our district that we haven't had in the past. We've got 4 elementary schools, the 5th and 6th grade school at Prosper Valley, and then the combined middle and high school. And then in terms of trends, this is something that I think it kind of is currently raging on a lot of listservs right now, but as I think most people are well aware, the New England region and Vermont more broadly has experienced declining enrollment for many, or declining population, declining student age for many years and declining enrollments. The regional agency that kind of looks at these things is called the New England School Development Council. And they forecast that same trend across Vermont, across the New England region. But for our district and for a couple other districts in the state, they actually forecast increasing enrollment. And as part of our application to the state for this project in 2021, NESDEC came to our district, did a study, and they forecast a gain of 120 students over a 10-year period to 2030. So when we make decisions about the sizing of the building and the kinds of decisions that go along with it, that's the source of truth that we look to. So this is a map of Vermont, and it's next to it is a list of those towns and the numbers of students who come from them, right? And you can see there the $2 million in tuition revenues that I talked about. Just some trends across Vermont. The reason I put this up here, this is actually a map of school choice towns in Vermont. And you see a couple of clusters. And in the post-Act 68 era, this is kind of the whole reshuffling of funding across the state. People who've lived here since the late 90s are probably familiar with Act 60. But the only schools that are really flourishing, I would say, in the state are the old town academies like Burr and Burton, St. Johnsbury, Linden Institute. And you can see that around those areas, those are the schools that have seen significant investment. And as a result of that investment, many towns around them have gone to school choice, right? So if you take, Burr and Burton down in Manchester in the Southwest, they were graduating in the 90s, about 50 students a class. Then they received a gift of $20 million in the late 90s. Other investors or philanthropists gave lots of money to the school. They did a series of building projects. And now 15 towns around Manchester send students to Burr and Burton. Now, I'm not trying to make a case that we're going to be a Burr and Burton or go independent or anything like that. I'm just trying to demonstrate that even in an overall kind of era of declining enrollment, as you have it, investment in schools can result in increases to enrollment. And this is what you see there. Now, Burr and Burton graduates about 200 students a year. And again, we're not trying to say that we're going to try to quadruple our enrollment, but just trying to demonstrate that these are some of the factors that we've seen in the kind of current era. So in terms of our school, in 2022, there was an inventory that was done by the Agency of Education, and they found that our school conditions in our district were the second worst in the state. Our building, the middle school and high school building, had a facilities condition index, that means how far depleted it is, of 96.7. That doesn't have a whole lot of useful life left in it. And that was a couple of years ago. A follow-up in 2023, this was a visual inspection. You might have seen some reports in the papers about Vermont statewide needing about $6.2 billion worth of repair work to school buildings, which is vastly underestimated. But the reason that they say it's underestimated is that these were visual inspections. Nobody was looking inside walls to see what may be wrong. But in the case of our school building, $16 million worth of immediate repairs that would be needed, right? Those chickens came home to roost for us about a year ago, in that we lost 6 classrooms due to the heat system going offline. The steam tunnels underneath the high school side were so corroded they couldn't carry heat to the classrooms, and so we lost the use. As a result, we had to go to the taxpayers about a year ago and say we need to do an emergency upgrade to the heating system and change that to a water system, hydronic system, plug it into the middle school. And when we did that, the old middle school pipes didn't do a very good job of handling it, so we wound up with a lot of kiddie pools under water lines, and it's kind of a mess. But it's up and running. The Buildings and Grounds crew does a very admirable job of keeping that building online, as they've done for a very long time. The high school side dates to the late 50s, 1958. There was an addition for the middle school 10 years later. But as you can see there in the lower left, that's a picture of one of our septic lines that's almost entirely calcified. A couple of years ago, a graduation night, had a lot of people in the building, flushing toilets, and all that sewage backed right back up into the bathrooms because the capacity of the sewage lines wasn't there. We tried, flushing that out. We put decalcification, materials in all the heating systems, but you're talking about 50, 60-year-old pipes. That's where we are. And then the big piece, I think the takeaway here is around building code. I'm sorry, this is at the bottom of this slide. The current building, it's grandfathered on several significant codes: ADA compliance, fire protection, seismic, and it's doubtful that you could actually bring that building up to a modern building code, even if you sunk a ton of money into it.
If I could just highlight again, this is something that I brought up at the PTO meeting. That building is not ADA compliant. It would not pass inspection. And this has created a severe headache as far as inclusivity and equity efforts at the school board. Students who are even temporarily injured cannot get from one building to the other building if the elevator, which goes down pretty regularly, is down. They have to actually exit the building, walk around, and enter in a different location. So I hope that everybody can really understand the weight of not being ADA compliant at a public school.
Thanks, Anna. Sherry, do you want to talk about what it's like being a teacher in the building? Before you were a superintendent, you taught for many years.
Right, and some of those windows were replaced. So the notion that nothing had been done over those 60 years, and we've had many board members who had served before, replacements were done. We did replace windows. We did replace part of the roof. But even with those replacements, to this day, you can't close those windows in the world language section. It's closed in the winter, it's locked shut, because once they're unlocked, you can't get them locked again. My office used to be right there next to the nurse's office, and I would put my water bottle on the windowsill in the morning, and by lunchtime it was pretty frozen shut. Those are with the new windows. And I think what's really important, I mean, the teachers who are there love the work and love those kids. They're committed, and you will go in no other district, I would say across the country, where students at the end of the class say thank you. It happens every day. Those are the kinds of students we get to work with. But the concerns, we for years had no technology. A teacher could plan a lesson and say, okay, we're going to do this technology time and time again. The technology would fail. Another thing that we were able to do with the ESSER money was to upgrade the technology. So I think the teachers and the students are doing an amazing job. We're one of the top high schools in the state, but the opportunity, and I think just one example is the middle school wing. And if your children were in the middle school for a long time, the classes were really commingled. You had high school social studies here for a 9th grade class, 10th grade class, and right down the hallway was the 7th grade English class. And so having the opportunity entering middle school, you're 12, 13 years old, to be walking the hallways with 18-year-olds who are in a very different developmental stage. This new facility allows us to put 7th grade students with 7th grade students, and then 8th grade students. And so they're potted together, creating a more separate experience. So the other part is the safety, and I'm not a fearmonger. I've been in education a long time. The middle school, high school is the only one of our buildings where we cannot contain an individual coming in the foyer. Even, it's great, Reading Elementary, you walk in the foyer, you're buzzed, you're let in. In the middle school and high school, we don't have that capacity. And if an intruder comes in, and often it's not an intruder, it could be a familiar face, but we don't know what they're bringing into the building. We cannot stop that individual. The new facility allows us to have an entryway that you buzz in, and then if they come into the building and we realize they are not there for positive reasons, we can contain every single hallway, and that's with one button. The other piece that's really, in terms of design, and our architects know schools well, it's built with an elbow. So there's not one long line of sight like we have now, as you would call it, the Green Mile. In middle school and high school, it goes almost the full length of the building. The new facility is built with an elbow, so there's no direct line of sight. We can close areas, we can make it safe for students, which for me is a really important piece.
Thanks, Sherry. We'll see some pictures here in a moment, but let's talk first about the steps that we've taken to date. This process goes back a number of years, about 8 years, in terms of looking at how to address the problems with our current school building. 2016, our Buildings and Grounds Committee authorized a group of board staff and community members to conduct an evaluation. We were fortunate in 2017 to get some private fundraising. In fact, all the money that's gone into this project up until a year ago has come through private donations, about $350,000 to get it to the point where it was at that point. In 2017, we used the $150,000 to bring on an architect. LaValle Brenzinger Architects was chosen and then conducted our master planning sessions. And it's really interesting now as we're seeing some of the standards that are coming out of Montpelier for school construction aid. That's a program that's been suspended since 2007. But some of the required steps are things that we did 6-7 years ago. And it's really encouraging to see that we're kind of ahead of the game where you have so many school buildings in Vermont that are in kind of the similar straits that we are. 2018, the facility study, comprehensive study, brought in a team of architects, engineers, food service, people across the board to kind of give us an evaluation of where we were. Brought in community members and faculty, staff to do these visioning workshops, establish our project goals. 2019, we got another $200,000 in private donations to keep some of that architectural work continuing, and we had the architects actually presented a set of options at that point in time, and I'll take you through what those options were and what the board's decision was. And at that point, the configuration committee within the board was tasked with looking at the financial feasibility of the new building. COVID comes in 2020, so not a lot of progress there, but by 2021, we've got schematic design. That's a stage in the architectural process that's completed. And we got our first costing at that point. Whiting Turner out of Burlington gave us a price for the building of $73.5 million. Our response to that was, this is not affordable, right? We need to take some steps to take the burden off of our taxpayers. And that's something that's been at the forefront of the school board from the beginning of this project. And I'll talk about the steps that we've taken. The first was in 2022, we went to the Woodstock EDC, the Economic Development Committee, and said, we got a grant for $50,000, brought on a private fundraiser. Her name is Marlena McNamee. Is Marlena here tonight? Maybe not. But we've had a wonderful amount of success with Marlena in less than 2 years. She's a veteran fundraiser from the SUNY Albany system. And she's been able to raise $3.5 million. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of money on a project that's like $100 million. The plan is to actually apply that money toward the early bond payments in order to keep the tax rate down, to make the project affordable for taxpayers. So we'll show you how that works when we look at the numbers. Then in 2023, we implemented a policy looking at what school districts have been able to pass bonds in the state. A lot of them haven't. Pretty much anything out of Chittenden County has gone down in flames. You've seen Waterbury had one fail. South Burlington had a bond fail. Fairhaven, Slate Valley, Stowe as recently as a couple months ago had their bond fail. And so we looked at Burlington and their high school project and the tax impacts that they've got. When we get to the finances, you'll see that the more students you have, the lower your tax rates are. That's how Vermont sets things up. So in Burlington, they got a lot of kids, and as a result, they can do a $200 million high school project and keep their tax rates at around tax impacts at around 16% to the taxpayer at the height of that bond repayment those first 5 years. And that's where we set our limit. We said, as a board, we're going to do our annual planning, and we'll have to do, if it comes down to it, having to do puts and takes, having to invest more in private fundraising, if it means attempting to drive enrollment, whatever it takes to bring that tax rate down to that 16% as a cap so that it's affordable for our taxpayers. So in 2023, a year ago, this is the first time they went to the public for really a check on kind of how we were doing. And the architects at that point really were at a point, they were about ready to start detailed design. And that's an expensive process. That's about $1.5 million worth of architectural work that we went to the taxpayers and said, can we borrow this? And taxpayers across the district said yes, about 60% approved that, which was an indication to us and a mandate to keep going with this project. We also borrowed $150,000 at that time to bring on our construction manager, and that's PC Construction, formerly Pizzarelli, a Vermont construction firm, a lot of good experience, and a great track record of delivering projects on budget and on time. We also did our costing exercise and value engineering in December to try to do some cost takeout that's part of our affordability strategy, and then put that bond on the ballot for March of this year. That's just coming up in a couple weeks. So the options that we looked at, in 2019 were these three that you see on the board here. It was to renovate, to take our existing building and just expand on it, or to build new. And the plan for the new building, and this is ultimately what we went with, is to build the building on the current site of the football field. And in doing that, that takes about 18 months worth of construction. It's a relatively fast build because you're building new. And then from there, move a lot of the furniture and equipment that was new during the pandemic into the building and have school open in time for class in 2026, the start of 2026. But we can get to that in a minute. But in terms of looking at these options, the criteria that we developed, learning environment, sustainability, site organization, and community connected, and then obviously project cost to value, the renovation option scored the poorest. That was at that time, about $51 million was the sticker price, and it really didn't move the needle. So the next thing we looked at was the most expensive option, and it also didn't score particularly well, which was this, build extensions around the building. And part of the criteria here, you see that sustainability, a big concern both for the school board and for the students is the fact that we're running on old fuel oil systems in a building envelope that's incredibly porous. We blow 1.8 million pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year from that facility. That's something that we want to do something about if we're going to make a major investment in our school building. And so with the new build, the idea is to build it with a very efficient envelope to be net zero ready, similar to the way Union Arena across the parking lot is. That's the first net zero hockey rink in North America, and we want to keep pace. So the board opted for the kind of the baby bear of these three options, kind of right down the sweet spot, the thing that made the most sense, and given the limitations of the current facility and how far gone it is, not to do a renovation. It's also interesting just to come back to those new state standards that came out on February 1st. The states actually said that they won't invest any money when they bring construction aid funding back in any building with an FCI above 65. Ours, like I said a few minutes ago, is 2 years ago was at 96.7. So if we wanted to do a renovation option, we'd be completely on our own, right? So to stay in the running for state funding, new build is the way to go. So, and then the other piece of it around renovation, not doing that, I'm spending the time to discuss this so much because it's easily the most frequent question that we get. Why can't we just renovate the old building? But the architect in their 2019 report said, pursuing a renovation-only option to the facility requires significant costs without addressing most of the solutions needed. It does not meet modern educational or efficiency standards, does not extend the life of the facility, and is not a good dollar value. So that was the basis of our decision. So this is a shot of the new facility as drawn up by the architects, and these are available online at the school district's website. You can see these. This is after our kind of value engineering sessions, and I'll take everybody through some of the steps we took when we get to the finances to make the building more affordable. Some more shots of the front there. You can see those houses along the back, as Sherry talked about, those separate 7th, 8th grade pods, and then on the high school side, there's more mixing. That's on the right-hand side of the screen. You see the high school. And this is a cutaway view of the interior of the building. Some of the features, the double gym is great. That's going to allow us to actually have the entire student body for an assembly for the first time. We don't currently have the ability to do that. The auditorium is a great opportunity both for school events and then for ways for the communities to be involved in the school. The central atrium is interesting. If you take a building tour, the current lunchroom is used for about 2 or 3 hours a day. And unlike that, this new central atrium will serve as a place where kids can eat lunch, but it's also be used for presentations or workshops or community events. When you talk to the architect, he'll tell you the usage of all the classrooms in this building is at 81% in terms of how busy the program is. So there's no wasted space in the new facility. It's very efficiently designed. So in terms of the next steps in the project timeline, January, February 2024, this is kind of where we are right now. Doing this final costing, getting the final costing out to voters. March 5th is the vote for the bond on the school building. Should that be successful, we'll look to break new ground on the new school. Not in early 2025. Our owner's representative is working with the construction team now, trying to he's making the case to say if we're going to do a pour, we want to do it before the freezing weather sets in. So get that in advance of the new year. Like I said, new school would open after 18 months of construction in time for school in 2026. Then we'd demolish the existing building and plan it so that we'd have the new Jim McLaughlin Field on the site of the old building. So let's talk about the financials. And Jim, I may need to roll over to you in a second.
It's okay.
Appreciate it. So let's first talk about the Vermont's education finance rules. This is probably the most thinky, complex part of the presentation, but then we'll talk about the strategy the board has taken to reduce impacts to taxpayers, talk about the final project cost and how we got there, and then show you those projected tax impacts and where you can find the calculator to plug in your own numbers. So in Vermont, like I said, Act 60 created this centralized education fund where all the tax revenue in the state gets pooled, and then it essentially gets doled back out to school districts based on how many students you have. So you start with your annual school budget, and this year the school budget is around $30 million, and you take away those local revenues. Local revenues are things like those tuition dollars I talked about earlier, the $2 million that comes out of there, and then you also have some grant money for various programs. Currently, our local revenues are just shy of $5 million, so about $25 million has to come from the taxpayer, and we call that education spend. That education spend gets divided by how many students you have. You may have seen some things in the paper recently about student weighting. Act 127 changed the way that different students are counted under these funding formulas. And the idea there is to get more money to students that are more expensive to educate, kids like English as a second language learners or students in rural schools. When we met with the PTO a few weeks ago, I was very careful to thank Adam and Anna because a few years ago, they did something really important. It turned out, we didn't know this was going to turn out this way, but they stood up for Reading Elementary School at a time when all the indications were you need to close these little schools under Act 46. But by doing that, we actually came out as a district ahead on this Act 127 stuff because we're a more rural school district. And we're going to get about $1 million more on the same tax rates each year for having a school like Reading Elementary or Barnard Academy. So financially, it turns out it was a wise decision. But anyway, that's the equalized pupil stuff. Kind of got off on a tangent there. But you take the education spending, you divide it by how many of these pupils you got, that gives you your per pupil spend. That's the most important factor in figuring out the tax rate. The per pupil spend gets divided by a number we get from the state every year called the yield, and that's essentially just the health of the education fund. How much money are they expecting to get in the fund, and as a result, how much do they have to raise from taxpayers? It's just a factor. You divide that and you get what's called the equalized tax rate. Equalized tax rate is the same rate that applies to all the towns in the same school district, and then you apply the CLA. And the CLA, my slides, see if I can get down to it. There we go. This is real estate, and the things that you may have heard recently about from the tax commissioner about 18.5% increase to taxes statewide. Much of that has to do with the CLA, and that is this massive increase in property value that we've all seen as a result of home sales during the pandemic. That's now appears to be cooling, but we have a tough year in front of us. Our timing for this bond is not great, but I'll talk about the steps that we've taken, some of to time that. But essentially, the common level appraisal is a study that looks at the difference between the latest assessed value of a home in a municipality, in a town, versus the going sale price. So it's essentially a factor that gets applied to say the house may be assessed at this amount, but this factor needs to get added to it so that people are paying based on fair market value. And that changes from town to town, so each town has its own tax rate. So there's the explanation of Vermont school financing. Now let's talk about this bond. When the bond comes online, it essentially becomes another line item in the school budget. And for what we're looking at for our, like I said, that's about $25 million worth of education spend. We'd be looking at adding somewhere between $6 and $7 million in that first year. That's a massive impact, and it's the reason why all these bonds have failed around the state is because they haven't taken steps to protect their taxpayers. And so the first step that you need to do is to make your project affordable by containing costs. Those value engineering sessions that I talked about, we were able to bring in our owner's rep. They beat up the pricing that PC gave us, and we took $16.5 million out of the project cost. We were a little heartbroken when the number that we got in 2021 from Whiting Turner, that 73.4 million, escalated all the way up to, what was it, 108 million when we started our value engineering sessions. That's all pandemic inflation. That's 15 to 19% annual inflation. We've seen it across the board. You go out to eat, things are just more expensive. Homes are more expensive. The same thing happens, and especially in the construction industry. But we were able to get that number down significantly, and I'll walk you through the steps we took here in a minute. The next piece of this, and if there's anything that people in this room take away tonight, it should be this. Under Vermont law, if you borrow money from the bond bank, you have 5 years to start making your payments, and the school district intends to take 3.5 of those. So a grace period of 3 years is what's in front of everyone should the bond be successful. That means no payments at all by the school district and no impact to taxes until late 2027. We feel that gives people time in order to make arrangements, or to some people that might mean there's a friend of mine who was looking at retiring in Woodstock, and she says, I think I'm going to work a couple more years because I don't want it to be crushed by a bond payment. Other arrangements, people can make, but time is the thing that people have to work with there. The next piece is the cap that I talked about, that 16% tax cap. Terms, the bond bank had quoted us last year 3.75 on the interest rate. We're also going to work with the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Program, very active in Vermont. They funded Winooski's building project at the very bottom of the bond market about 5 years ago at 2%. And they gave them a grant as well. We won't get that lucky. Killington was able to get $20 million on their TIF district this last year. We think they're very interested in our project. Some portion of our funding will come from the USDA, and we'll look at that blended rate. But another thing on the terms is that both of those sources enable you to extend your repayment term to 40 years. And while if you're just talking about like a home mortgage or a more simple financing system, that might not be a good idea because you're going to pick up a lot of payments on the cost of the project. Vermont's education system, the financing system is so complex that those sources come from lots of places. So that's not the thing that we're solving for. We're trying to solve for the tax rate, the impact to the individual. So that's another option. I'll show you how that plays out. So anyway, the next thing is around fundraising. Like I said, $3.5 million, applying that money when those payments do come online in 2027, looking at subsidizing those early payments to keep them underneath a cap amount that doesn't crush people. And the last thing is enrollment. And I'll show you how if the school district, if this building is a draw for those school choice towns that all surround us, if there's further consolidation or school districts around us that decide they don't want to keep operating schools and they'd rather send them our way, and we pick up enrollment because of that, then we'll be in a great position to bring tax rates down even further. But I do want to point out that the base financial case for this project does not depend on increases to enrollment. This is not a pie in the sky, if you build it, they will come kind of a project. We have sized the building, sized the project, sized the financials for the students we have. So here we go. I'm going to spend a couple slides here. This is the rear view of the facility. One thing that draws a lot of attention for people in construction, they'll say, well, what are you doing with a flat roof? It's not a flat roof. It is slightly pitched, but that's kind of home to some of the new power systems, the photovoltaic panels that we'll have. You can see Union Arena there and their solar panels as well. The steps that we took during the value engineering sessions, the first thing, we got a lot of pushback from people on plans to put in a turf field. People said, this is Vermont, nobody wants to play on a turf field, it's expensive anyway. We listened to that, took that out, and saved $800,000. Same thing with the baseball field. We'll have a separate baseball field. It won't be quite as fancy as what the architects had drawn up, but it'll still be better than what we have, and we saved $700K there. We also removed there were trees and islands in the parking lot. Our buildings and grounds manager is pretty happy that we took this step because he doesn't have to play Pac-Man every time that he goes to snowplow the thing. So it's just a plain asphalt parking lot now. That saved us about $300K. The walkways on the outside of the building, there were some outdoor spaces, amphitheater type things that we got rid of. That was nearly $1 million. Also took out, the building is 100% electrical, right? It's an electric building. We had initially intended to do all geothermal with the wells underneath the parking lot. It's very expensive in the upfront cost. So we dialed that back to a 50-50 geo heat pump building, and we saved $4 million that way. In this picture, you can see this is the old design. Those classroom spaces on the back of the building had these kind of barn sheds over the top of them. Those are purely architectural, and we said, get rid of those. They don't have any function. Saved $1.5 million. Then on the theater, that was a place where we had some pretty elaborate equipment that was looking to go in there. Scaled that back, again, still gonna be far better than what we got today, but we're able to save $500,000 there. Then on the inside of the building, we took out a bunch of glass. There was a lot of window treatments and glass. 25% of that went away, about $500,000. Less costly materials, using just like, instead of a $6 tile, using a $3 tile, able to take $1.5 million of savings there. The greenhouses, for some reason, showed up really expensive. We right-sized those, used different materials, $2 million. And then this is interesting, a lot of the kind of feedback we get or questions from people is, well, why don't you make the building smaller? And we did. We took this pod on the far left side of the screen, that upper left side. This is the original design. We cut that in half, and that was almost 6,000 square feet. You can see in the new design, it's much smaller. That up at the top there, close to Union Arena. And that saved us a grand total of $2 million. So reducing the building size, and that also reduced the building capacity by 50 students to do that. That's not the most economical way of saving costs. But in doing that, we took the building down to essentially the same number of classrooms as we have in the current building. And because of that, further cuts to the design would require cuts to programs that students are interested in, school choice students. So if there's an AP class or special education or some offering that we've got that we are no longer able to offer in the new building, those school choice students that give us $2 million a year may go to other schools. And that's something we absolutely want to avoid. And it's part of the financial picture. So, like I said, we started at that $108 million number. We got it down $16.5 million to a construction cost in the $90 million range, with the soft costs that go on top of that of around $9 million. That's things like permits, fees, fixtures, furnishings, equipment. We came in at a total of the $99 million you see on the warning for the ballot. What does that equate to? So I talked about this escalation, the 73.4 from 2021, and then having to go back up and come back down. But when you divide that 99 million by 158,000 square feet, you get a square foot price of 627 square feet. Let's hope it's not 1,000. Coincidentally, on December 20th, as part of the state's ongoing efforts to bring back school construction aid, they revised their square foot pricing standards. And our school, because given the mix of 2/3 high school, 1/3 middle school, comes out to a maximum allowance on the square foot by the new state standards of $656 a square foot. So at $627, we are well within the new state standards and in good shape in terms of eligibility for construction aid. Then looking around the state, you say, okay, that's all well and good, but how does that, is it in terms of other schools that have been built recently, how does that stack up? And it's cheaper than almost every other school that's been built in the state in the last 3 years. An architectural firm by, who was this? This was, Truett's Collins out of Burlington provided these numbers to the state to help them set their square foot standards. And these are other schools around the state that either have current pricing or have been built in the last couple years. Burlington's project that I've talked about, they're at $836 a square foot. Danville's at $633. That was built a couple years ago. Allenbrook, $651. Career centers are pretty spendy. They got a lot more bells and whistles in them. They were at $727. And then Milton Elementary, it was on the ballot until recently. I think they've decided to push theirs. I saw in the Digger today, was at $721. And notably, this was at, all these project pricing is without furniture, fixtures, or equipment. So our project price includes that. And at $627 is far cheaper than all these others. So let me talk about the tax impacts in this calculator. If you go to if I'm able to get up to, I'm just going to go to the calculator. On the school district website, let me see. You go to the www.mountainviews.org, mtviews.org /breaking new ground, and you scroll down, and there's a box that has a picture, and it says, understanding the tax impacts. And when you click on the button to download the calculator, this is what pops up. And I apologize, this is going to be an eye chart for anybody who isn't sitting very close. But what you can do with this calculator, you can see when this thing opens up, it's got the $99 million bond amount. It's got a 3.6% interest rate. We think we're in pretty good shape to land somewhere around that, given where the bond market is now. And we've stretched the bond term to 40 years. And as you can see here, no payments from the FY24 that we're currently in till FY27, so no impact from the bond. And then when the bond payments start in our fiscal year 28, the school runs on the school year, so we start our fiscal in July of the prior year. Anyway, so when those come online, this is what you see, and these are the most expensive impacts. But what you do is you go in and you put in your home value, and you make sure you got the town right. That's here. There's a drop-down menu. You can pick Reading, or if you're not Reading, another town. And then it's going to tack that CLA that I was talking about during the finance explanation onto your home value to give you the fair market value of your home, and that's what you pay your taxes on. That's going to apply the tax rate that we have calculated for next school year, and give you the impact of the bond projected over a 30-year time frame. You can also go here, and as you can see, there's two sides to this calculator. There's the somebody who doesn't get any income sensitivity credits in Vermont. 2/3 of taxpayers get some degree of credit from the state. And if you make less than $128,000 this year, you qualify for them. You don't really get much for credit unless you make less than about $90,000. But at that point, on the right-hand side, you see the impact of tax credits, right? So that people who have who are income sensitized have a very different forecast from people who are paying based on the full value of their home. Other things you can see in the calculator, because we do get a lot of questions about, well, what if there's cost overruns? Well, you can increase the, if we're not able to fundraise to address that, or enrollment doesn't address it, and we had to go back to the taxpayer, you can enter a different amount and see just what the impact of a $10 million cost overrun would be. We're pretty confident in PC Construction as part of their pre-qualification package. They gave us examples of 5 different recent projects they've done that came in within $3 million of their initial estimates. We have $5 million of contingency on our project, so we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to come close. But if you want to see what a cost overrun would do, you can put that in. If you want to see what not getting as good of an interest rate would do, you can put that in. Same thing, you can say, hey, what if they raise $1 million worth of funds because they've already raised 3.5? What would that do to my tax rate? You can pop that right in. Look, that's only $100,000. That's not going to move the needle. And then on the enrollment side, there's a couple boxes that you can look and see how powerful. And like I said before, that's far and away the most significant factor. For instance, we're going to be opening a new pre-K at West next year based on the fact that there's 60 kids on our waiting list. That's 15 students right there. So if you put them in, what does that do to the tax rate? I mean, that shaves 1.5 points off those first year payments, just getting 15 kids that first year. And we still have another couple years to work on it. And then there's a box that says annual enrollment change. You can put a positive number in there, a negative number in there, and see what it does to your own taxes. So like I said, that's on the school district website, and everybody can check that out and make that decision for themselves. All right, let me pause there. That's kind of the point in the presentation that I wanted to get to. But let me stop there in case you guys have other things on your agenda or want to ask questions.
No, we have nothing else on the agenda. But
Okay.
So go ahead and continue your presentation.
Yeah, if
There
there
was a question online from Paige, I believe.
Oh, good. I don't know if you need to unmute.
It was in the
Here, let me go to the chat, and then we can see. Okay, here's Paige's question. Oh, okay, Paige asked, if and when do you think the state might financially support new school builds, or is this just a rumor right now? I don't know. Allison and Tesha are here this evening. What do you guys know about the school construction aid program and potential timing?
So we are working in house education. I'm Tesha Buss. I'm your state rep. and I serve on the House Education Committee. Right now, we have in draft form a bill that will start us on the road to school construction. Right now, this year, we will be doing planning grants. So the master plan that Ben spoke of early in this presentation that we completed a while ago, there are many schools in the state that have not even come close to doing that in any way, shape, or form. And so for us to truly understand at a state level comprehensive needs, and for us to evaluate our entire education system, we need this huge overview. So that will happen, and there will also be another working group that will happen throughout the summer. It will be smaller than last year so that they can meet more regularly and be able to assess how we can potentially hit $10 million a year in state funding to schools. We will not be divvying it out for sure 30% upfront to any project. What we have determined was that that wasn't sustainable, and it led us into, well, it wasn't sustainable.
It led us into closing the program.
So we closed the program. We don't want that to happen again. So what we've done is we've looked at other states, and in those other states, instead of giving you 30% up front of $99 million, $30 million up front, we subsidize 30% of your bond payment annually.
It's the same thing we're doing with our fundraising.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it allows us to fund more projects more regularly. We still, and I've still turned to them and said, that's all fine and good, but is that going to help towns actually pass bonds? And so that's a huge part of the summer work that we have to do. But we are very motivated to do this. We are looking at funding sources, the joint fiscal office that gives the legislative branch all the different financial modelings. They're there to assist us, and they are doing a huge amount of research to help us achieve this goal and to get this program reinstated in a new, exciting way.
One of the things that we hear a lot is, well, if you go ahead and pass this bond, why would the state give you any money? And we bear in mind the fact that Burlington passed their bond last year, and they have the biggest chunk of the legislature. About a third of the legislature is Chittenden County. So it seems very unlikely that if the state brings back school construction aid, there will not be a look-back provision to help fund programs that have already broken ground. And that's actually in the materials that they came out with on February 1st is some consideration for look-back. So that was encouraging. Are there other questions? Yeah, can I take questions?
I don't have any questions.
No.
There's one down here.
I just wanted to ask about the 3-year moratorium on payments. Is there a penalty for that, or is there like a minimum?
The clock's running, right? So so what you don't get to do is you don't get to push out the total repayment period. So instead of having, but your payments divided by 40 years, your payments would be divided by 37 years. They become a little bit more expensive. But with our strategy of applying that the fundraising dollars, it overcomes that. But and the other interesting thing about that is you don't actually have to lock in the bond for a while if you don't have to. Say that there's a spike in the interest rate market, you're not going to get stuck with that. So what we can do is work on bond anticipation notes, which have maybe a larger amount of interest. You might be working on a 5 or 6%, but it's on a very short amount of time. And so then if you get a more favorable rate that comes through, say after a year, you lock in at say 3.3, something like that. It can make a lot bigger difference.
Lock in within the 3-year period?
Yes, exactly.
And whenever time we actually sell the bond is when we lock the interest rate. So we're going to work hand in hand with the bond bank to watch the market and use their crystal ball to hope that we hit it near the bottom. Bond rates have come down 15 or 20 basis points since Christmas. And so that's still over 3.5%, but we're hoping that that trend continues for a while, and we'll watch what where we're going with the elections and what they have on what sort of impact that will have on the interest rates and everything else, and use somebody else's wisdom on making decisions.
Yeah, that sounds very positive. There's going to be a rate cutting cycle beginning.
Yeah,
that's
summer.
what's being predicted.
Yeah. Okay.
Ma'am?
Sarah Koblinski, Brown School House Road. Can you talk a little bit more about the CLA? One of the things I've heard in the past is one of the things locally that can be most important is where we stand in relation to that. And if you could, a little more explanation.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe everybody else does.
No, I'll go into some more detail.
The one-to-one and then
Yeah.
less or greater than the
Right.
Letting those numbers line up.
So you start with that equalized tax rate that every town, that's a function of school spending. So for this next school year, there's gonna be, as everyone's heard, there's gonna be a big increase to taxes, right? But only about 6% of that comes from school district spending. The rest of it, in most towns around the school districts, it's in the excess of a 20% increase, is due to that CLA. And that CLA is set by, like I said before, looking at real estate sales, and what it's called the equalization study. It happens every year. The Department of Taxes goes out, they look at recent home sales in a town, and they take that 3-year window, and that's what they base the difference between the assessed value of properties and the going price of real estate sales. And you say, okay, that's what we're gonna set it at. When the CLA gets reset, it's interesting. In Pomfret, they reset their CLA. They did a reappraisal last year, and that reset their CLA. And that looks great on paper, but don't get too excited because that reappraisal can result in that assessed value being far higher than what you were paying taxes on previously. But I guess what we're seeing, and I think the encouraging thing is that we're not seeing people showing up from Brooklyn with $1 million in cash, and at least not as much as we were during the pandemic, and driving those prices up like we did before. So the thought is, with the 3-year grace period that we talked about, that gives time for those real estate factors to cool off, and for us to give people a little breathing room to start making those bond payments. Did I answer your question?
I think that, I'm looking at Jim Dunn over your shoulder.
Sure.
He kind of taught me about CLA 20 years ago. And in another supervisory union, where we were working on some of these same kinds of things. I think that that's an area where the community, Reading as a town in and of itself, needs to have a little more conversation, not tonight, but a little more conversation about CLA and where we are, and where appraisal and reappraisals fit in, and what we really want to think about, and project ahead how this might impact. I love this idea of this 3-year buffer to kind of work these things out. But there's more to the CLA story than
Yeah, sure is.
do it in one sentence.
And the reappraisal process is the responsibility of your select board at some point in time. It's not their fault that the market's gone fast. They have no fault in this at all, but eventually, at some point, the town will do a reval and change your values, and that's something that your select board is in charge of and do contract at some point.
We are in the process of doing the
There you are.
reassessment now.
Pretty much every town in
Yeah.
Vermont's required to do a reappraisal at this point.
In our district, 55% of our total funding comes from homestead. 45% comes from non-homestead.
Right, but the CLA applies to both.
The CLA applies to both.
Other questions?
But that's, Jim, that's another good point, is people say to me all the time, oh, seasonal residents don't pay for the bond, they're not paying for the bond, they're not paying for the school. That's actually not true, because the bond payments are part of our education budget. And that is paid for in our equitable tax rate that is then shared by all taxpayers, including our seasonal
Yeah,
residents.
and I put this slide up here, thank you, Allison, I think that's important for people to know that the homestead, that's your primary residence taxpayer, only pays about a quarter of the ed fund, that's 26%. And this is across the whole state, this is about $2 billion, it's that central pot of money that I was talking about. So about 25% comes from homestead property taxpayers. Far more comes from those non-homestead, the second homeowners, the business property, just higher dollar value. 41% for that. That's the lion's share of the ed fund. The other sources are resales and use taxes. All the state lottery goes in there. Meals, rooms, and alcohol tax, vehicle purchase tax. I've heard recently that they keep track on all these sources kind of on a monthly basis. And cannabis sales have actually, I don't know if anybody feels about that, but that's a source of revenue that's outpacing what they'd expected.
And all funneled into prevention. I mean, primarily funneled into after school and prevention.
Probably where it needs to be, at least to start. But I mean, there's other states, like, when Colorado and Washington were the ones that were kind of on the forefront of this legalization of cannabis, they were able to pay for lots of schools by doing that. So it could be a way that we could see tax rates come down, but Nobody has a crystal ball. All right, well, if there's no further questions, well, thank you for, oh, ma'am, yeah.
What is your current cost per student, and do you have a projection on what the cost per student will be once your construction, should it happen, goes up?
On the per pupil cost, it's interesting because when they changed with Act 127 and all the changes to student weighting, it really threw a monkey wrench in our ability to kind of conceive of what it costs per actual human being in the building. Our pupil count for 1,000 students is now 1,500, right? Isn't that right, Jim? And so with that, there is a per pupil spend that gets calculated on that. And I guess, Jim, if you have that handy.
For next year, it's projected to be $16,601. But please keep in mind that our LTW ADM, which is long-term weighted average daily membership, is about 150% of our actual student body.
At 1,500 versus
we have
1,000.
1,500 students in our weighted ADM, but we only have about 1,000 in our buildings.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's very meaningful to you, to hear those numbers.
But I'm just wondering if you're projecting any costs.
Yeah.
Because you will have increased operating costs.
Oh, absolutely,
Yep.
and it's that bond payment that goes just that, like another line in the school budget, and that's what we've had our sights dead set on, to keep that from being, from breaking the bank, right, from the outset.
And didn't you put that into the calculation? For additional students, you put in additional monies to cover that?
Oh, absolutely, every 15 students gets another $80,000 worth of cost. We're not just saying this is all pennies from heaven. You have operating costs around.
One of the reasons that we're looking at holding off the payment for a couple of years on the bond is because we did borrow a little over $4 million for this year for work at Killington, for the engineering here, for the heating system at the middle high school. We're doing a project on HVAC at the Reading School this summer, and all of those payments all of that debt will be paid off when this comes in, and that way we reduce $1 million of spending and take on the new spending for this project. And so it helps soften that blow. It doesn't eliminate it, but it helps soften it.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I just was gonna ask for some clarification. As much as I appreciate the idea of saving dollars wherever you could in terms of the new building structure, if I understood you correctly, you said that the building project is sized to accommodate precisely the student body that you currently have. But earlier in the presentation, you stated that in 10 years' time, you're projecting a somewhat 20% increase potentially in your student body. So we're putting all this money into creating a new structure. Building costs are cheaper when you project for growth at the outset. So where is the equalization in that to say, what are we going to do with all these new kids? Or if we have these school of choice towns that we're trying to encourage to come in?
Sure, there's capacity. Do you want to speak to this?
So it's not that it was built for the same number of kids, it's the same number of classes. So we have the same number of sections of world language, same number of sections of mathematics. The capacity in the classrooms, and we were talking to Lee, the architect today, there's more room in those classrooms. They're designed for a specific, so the science labs are already determined, they're built with lab space, they're not just any classroom, which is what we've been doing. We throw science here, so now it's really designated, so there's more room in all the high-level content area classes. We were working today on all our art classes, we have a virtual reality classroom, so there are different standards for the numbers for that, but so there is room for more students with the same level of programming we currently have.
Okay, so I think you said the classrooms are at roughly 80% right now.
Right, so for example, 7th grade is now currently about 65 students. Typically and previously, we had 110 students in every grade. Yeah, those are the, so we have the same number of classes. They're smaller in terms of number of students in those classes.
So what is the average class size?
Currently, we're about 17, depending upon if it's an AP class or for like a 9th grade English class. So 17 is about the average size class at the high school now.
And how many faculty do you have?
At the high school, middle school, about 50. We have 150 across the district, so about 50 faculty staff at the middle school, high school now.
That one clarification on what
sorry,
Sherry had said earlier. we're at 80% utilization of the classrooms, where the classrooms are not 80% full necessarily.
Okay.
But they're used 80% of the time.
Of the day.
Of the
yeah.
day.
And one other example, just in terms of why, why is the building bigger under the modern education standard? This is an example from your line of work, is special education. In the last 15 years, there's been recognition that one-on-one time with special ed kids in a closed space is essential to make progress with those students. And the current facility has very little of that, whereas in the new facility, there'll be far more capacity. And our special ed programs, thanks to this person here, are some of the best in the region, right? And that's something we want to continue.
I just wanted to make sure that there was definitely room for growth in terms of.
Yes,
putting
so
all the-
by the numbers, I'll
And-
tell you, it's.
And I know that there's, well, I just want to say too, that I know that there's certain school years, like the class, I think right now currently that is at Pomfret is 6th grade is a much larger, like they're balloon
Right.
classes, and I think the 3rd grade year currently is a balloon class. So
Yep.
that you have a lot of this expansion and contraction in terms of your population size for where you're plotting out 7th and 8th grade. So being able to make sure that the building is structured to handle those kinds of fluctuations.
Yeah, just by the numbers, we got about 455 currently in the middle school, high school, and capacity for 600. So good room for growth there. That's down from 650 when we started value engineering. And if need be, if we were, incredibly successful, say in 10 years, like, you see further school closures around, like Ludlow lost their high school a couple years ago. If you see, more of that coming our way, we could build that wing back that we took off. We left all the mechanical systems sized for, the same capacity, so we could expand by 50 there.
Ben, maybe I could just enter the record. So I've been on the school board for the last 6 years. My wife and I moved here 13 years ago now. 14 years ago with the decision this is where we wanted to raise a family, right? And that was large part based in quality of life. And I think for a lot of the world in the last 4 years, quality of life has become really important as we watch what happened with the pandemic. 6 years ago, when I was on my first year as the board, I stood up as the sole representative at the time that was for keeping the school vibrant and fully populated, right? I stood up adamantly. I still have traumatic nightmares at a board meeting in Woodstock Elementary in which the board, I think it was 17-1, me being the sole person saying no, said we're going to move grade 4 through 6 out of Reading Elementary, right? We were able to move past that and now make Reading a pre-K through 4 school. The argument that a lot of us in the community had at the time, and I still stand by today, is when you start chipping away at a school, and potentially the need for a school and community, you start to lose the vitality of that community, right? And I don't present this as a doomsday option, but my concern is, and I think a lot of those in the broader communities of our district is, if we don't start investing in our middle school, high school, which has a great academic reputation across the region, how are we going to remain vibrant and vital as a school district that's going to potentially attract people to this area, but also maintain people in this area?
Thanks, Adam.
I just had one more thing to contribute about what the state is looking for in school construction aid coming back online, and that is addressing a concern that a lot of people have had about a building getting to this point and annual repair and maintenance. And there is a section in there that other states have used, which is a 3% reinvestment tool that allows the project to take 3% right up front, because in year 2 you shouldn't have a huge amount of repair and maintenance, and you can apply that directly to your principal and interest payments. So we're looking at that, but then that also makes sure there'll be state level oversight to make sure that each school continues to maintain. I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, it's something we haven't been able to do. It's great.
Right. I've got a quick question then. Yeah, demo of the old building, is that included in the 90 or the 9 soft?
Is it soft or that's soft?
No, it's in the hard
cost. It's in the hard cost. Yeah, it's 1.9 million, but it's in the bond amount.
Okay.
That's the demolition is 1.9?
Yep,
Yes.
and that includes the environmental aspects. We know we've got asbestos, we know we got lead, we know we got PCBs.
In the soft cost is where we have the cost for the asbestos and PCB abatement.
Okay.
And the hard cost is the rest of the demo.
And
And the reconstruction of the football field and baseball field is part of the 90?
Yes, it's all in, it's all, that's 627 per square foot, we like to say it's in there. All right.
I've got one last thing I've been bringing, and I don't know if it's too late, but from some of the stuff I've seen online and in the news, where there are still people that are pushing for some of the other two options that were presented. While not personally an issue for me, I'm curious, just looking at the slide again, I was at the PTO presentation a few weeks ago. Have you guys, or would you be willing to make transparent how you got to those numbers for the viability of the other two options, not just the financials, but if I was going to play devil's advocate, that scoring system looks to me like you make whatever numbers up you want to make the option you wanted to pursue the most viable option. So I think
I'll say this, those were initial numbers based on square foot pricing for the work that needed to be done. If you were to, who knows what a renovation would entail in that building?
I don't mean the costs. You had, I believe it was 6 categories that you were scoring each
Oh,
of
the
the
scoring
options.
categories.
So that
How did the scoring-
transparency into the scoring.
Oh, interesting.
Might help.
Sure.
For those that are still
Yeah.
feeling like renovation or the hybrid work option.
Yeah, that was in that report, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Lee's report, we can put that right on.
Okay.
That's a good suggestion.
If it's not too late, normally.
No, we can put it up there tomorrow.
But it might be helpful to put to words just now of why renovation is so difficult in the middle school, high school, in terms of how it was constructed and the way it works.
Yeah, sure. To go back to those pictures at the start of the presentation, you can see, other than the condition, we were going through, Vermont Digger, there's an article in there today. Sherry and I were going through with the photographer about a month ago. It's just running now. But we got to the boys' locker room, and Paul says, yeah, we're down to one shower in here. And we're down to one shower because all the mixing valves are broken and we can't get to them because they're in concrete, right? So to get to replace those showers, and this is the story all throughout the building, and I put this up here so you can see all the water pipes in the building are in either behind fixed concrete slabs or running through concrete blocks. So you got to swing a sledgehammer and just to get to them to be able to replace them and then replace them and then fix it with, I don't know how that works, but very, very labor intensive to try to address things that in a stick-built building would be far easier to get to.
And I think the other part, Adam, and I'm glad you brought this up, when you're renovating and you're still having school going, where do we put those students? Because the middle school, high school part is a tear down because of the way the design was. It's concrete slabs, you can't perforate them. So what do we do? What do I do with those 300 kids or 200 kids that are on that end of the building? It takes so much longer to do the renovation and keep the program running than it is to build a new building in a year and a half. The conversation I have most often with the middle school and high school students, and I'm the senior class advisor, very proud of our senior class. They worry about not going to school. They are the graduating class that their freshman year, they were not in school. Their greatest fear, and right before winter break, we almost had to close school for 2 days because the pipes were breaking and the leaks we had a kiddie pool under a leak. So they want to make sure that they can go to school every day, they can play sports every day, they can be with their peers every day, because the impact of not knowing about whether the school will be open or not in terms of their own mental health is pretty significant. And they worry. They see us in there trying to make the toilets run and make sure that the heating system is up and down, and they just want to go to school every day.
And from a financial standpoint, to answer this question, you can do this with the calculator. You go back to that state report that says you got $16 million worth of urgent needs. Even if we could stretch that out over 10 years, which I don't know, I doubt. But if you just put in a 10-year term to take on $16 million and no interest rate because you're not bonding that, but all that stuff that Sherry's talking about leads to attrition. All that noise in the hallways, constant construction, if that's the road you want to go down. You lose 10 students a year, and this is actually capped at down to 800 because not everybody can pick where they go to school. But you can see the impact on taxes. You'd be okay for about 5 years. You'd still be coming out a little bit better than building a new building. But by the time you get to about year 10 or 15, you're spending more on the tax rate because you lose that per pupil spend because you're losing kids. And now you got a situation where by year 15 or 20, you're paying way more than you would have if you just built the building. So, yeah.
So what impact, if any, of this past summer's flooding occurred in the school, and my question then is, have hydronic studies been applied?
Yes.
In anticipation of more flooding?
Yes, and we can both speak to this, but the neither during Irene in 2011 or this summer's flooding was there, did water get up to the level of the building. We had water in the maintenance building down on the lower level, and then some of the lower sports fields, were underwater and took mud and things. But no water has come over this berm. There's a very high berm if you go stand on the football field and look over at the river. It's pretty steep, and there's a lot more lowland area just nearby downstream that water spills out into. So it's not in the floodplain. It is in the river corridor, and this is a program in Vermont that prevents you from building things in like a wider swath. If I think the idea is that if the river changes direction in 100 years or something like that, then you don't want to have buildings that are in there. And as a result, in that program, we're okay to build back what we have, right? You're kind of grandfathered in that way, but we can't put anything new in. And one of the most frustrating things is we can't put a track around the football field, right? Because we don't have a track now. So future year kind of project, maybe something we could continue to look at fundraising for, get a new site for a track. But currently that's the state of things.
And all the operating systems are on the roof. So if you just look at Farmers Market and the White Cottage opened right away because they had everything up on the roof. Farmers didn't. So this new system, and if you saw the design, you can see where all our operational systems are on the roof. Both in Irene and this summer, we were out there. The water didn't even come close to that level, but just in case, when we talked about design, we wanted all our systems to be up on the roof.
So this building will be built above the 500-year flood line, which is what you were asking, I think. Our lower fields did flood. We didn't have enough costs from either the July flood or the fall flood to qualify for FEMA. So our costs were under $10,000. They were really insignificant for all the repairs to the fields and anything else that we lost. So our losses were really minor. We had a little bit of issues here in the Reading School. We didn't get water in the building, but the groundwater rose so high that our elevator shaft flooded, and for a couple of weeks we couldn't operate the elevator because it was full of water.
Well, it's because you and I, Jim, we dragged the goalposts out of the water.
Well, yeah, you, me, and Joe, we went swimming that day and
good job.
pulled a lot of things out. But no, our losses were really minimal. We had some silt that we spent some time cleaning up, but not bad.
I'm more concerned. I appreciate putting in the future putting all the HVAC in the roof and stuff. But I'm more concerned with construction costs because I was personally involved with the building of a high school next to it, and when digging occurred for the foundations of the new project, there was a lot more water than was anticipated, and pumping ended up in millions of dollars.
It's interesting. We actually did borings on the football field to determine the suitability to hold the load. And if I remember right, this goes back a few years, but they determined that it was glacial till was and I can send you the report if you'd like to see it, but optimal for a building like ours, putting it there.
And so there could be some water near the bottom of shafts for any pilings we need to put down. For the actual building, it will be above the water table and above the 500-year flood.
All right. One more.
You mentioned $2 million in tuition revenue a year. Is there currently a line item in the budget at all for marketing to promote the school for tuitioning the students? And if not, is that something that can be considered?
That's one of my top priorities. Anna will tell you. I've been talking about it for 2 years.
Yeah.
But
And there's great potential for bringing in new students. I mean, I think just passing the bond will excite a lot of local towns.
It's kind of interesting.
And there's already been successful recruiting prior to that.
Right.
So there's definitely a lot of growth potential.
Yeah, two things. One, the Woodstock EDC just gave another grant of $25,000 to continue Marlena, right? So that on the fundraising side, we'll keep her going, and then she's looking to expand into the enrollment piece. That's kind of a function of Vermont funding. That most places, more students mean more cost. Here,
Right.
it's more students and your tax rates go down, right?
Right.
The other thing I would say is, this is just an anecdote, but a friend of mine, she's older, she's in Woodstock, her kids are out of school, and she's been on the fence on this project, and she I don't wanna give her away, but, who she is, but she was, she works at a shop, and a family came through today from Weathersfield, and their son was touring schools. And she said, she called me up to say, I'm yes on this bond vote. And I said, what changed your mind? And she says, this family came in and they were looking at Norwich, and they were looking at Hanover, and they were looking at Woodstock. And they said, if this bond passes, he's going to Woodstock. If not, he's gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And he said, that made me realize that there are kids out there looking at this community, looking at this building.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking more, not just marketing for what Marlene is doing in terms of the fundraising side of things, but maybe not directly, that sounds shady, but.
Recruiting.
Yeah, exactly, focusing on the potential
Yeah.
students and not just the families and trying to bring more
No,
money.
and we've just begun to scratch the surface there. Our associate principal, Cody Tancredi, went down to Weathersfield last year. How many new freshmen did we get from Weathersfield?
We had 20 new freshmen overall this year, which was a big.
I think 9 of them came just from Weathersfield because Cody went down to a career fair and established some relationships, got kids. It's really about community. It's connecting these kids with the activities that they like and other communities of kids. So like the hockey teams. We just got the mountain biking club. That's a big growth. So it's kind of that growth mindset.
No club.
Team.
I'm sorry.
And this is also something that we do at the school board level, where we're starting to set up the infrastructure to support bringing in new students, like bus routes and that stuff like that, so that it's more accessible and more attractive to choose Woodstock, to choose Mountain Views over other school districts.
I'll admit that I have a conflict of interest, so I work in the North Star Federally Qualified Healthcare Center system, which is Springfield, Ludlow, further south and into New Hampshire. And when we're recruiting providers to come work in our system, I am first and foremost the one that's always making myself present at the recruitment dinners. Oh, you have a family? Let me tell you about the town of Reading, right? Let me tell you about our school district, right? But in all seriousness, when folks are moving from out of state to this area, these are the areas they're looking at, right? And they're looking at schools, and they're looking at, and no offense to Green Mountain Union High School or others, but they're saying, oh, Woodstock High School, how can I get there? And what's a viable place to get my foothold into the real estate market? And they're looking at places like Reading, they're looking at Bridgewater. People would like to be in Woodstock, it's a little bit less attainable for folks. So I think that, in my humble opinion, I think that Vermont in our area is at kind of a really important crossroads of, are we going to invest in the potential of making the state more sustainable and making it, providing kind of a higher quality of life for the middle and the low income families that want something outside of urban and suburban areas.
Thanks, Adam. I need to pop this into the chat, the video. I said I'd do that, so let me do that. Any other questions?
Any others from online?
I was trying to find the chat. Where do we find chat these days here? Chat, there we go.
We have another question in person as well.
I don't have a question, but I cannot help but put in a plug with so many of you from the Supervisory Union level here to please help us here in Reading think about the environment and the Reading Elementary School building. Truly one flood again away from disaster. And we've talked about how important it is to keep this school, but protecting the physical being of the school is something we hope that you can. I know Joe Bergoli has paid some attention to it, but I happen to think it's not enough attention yet. So please, just a pitch.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, well, thank you everybody for your time and attention tonight.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Very informative.
Reading's a great town.
Great audience.
All right, next on the agenda. Is there anything else to come before the agenda?
Are you going to be seeing
That's other.
another upstairs? Are
you have any other? Do you have another, Bob?
Because this is something that she was going to pick up tonight. That's a signed,
Second?
Thank you all for having us here.
Thank you. Yeah.
One from October.
Very informative.
We just,
It's already in the numbers?
it's already in your number.